Jose's good. I think Jose's a good teacher and a student, right, Jose?
I wasn't such a bright student, to be honest, but I was just so last week the meeting was pretty interesting, so I went ahead and made some points, took some notes on it immediately, and I think I posted that on Twitter. What?
Good teacher is always a good student. Is that true?
I wouldn't agree with that, John. Sometimes being a bad student gives you a view on how to be a good teacher.
Okay. We're waiting for James, but I had a call with him earlier. How's everybody doing? It's Friday. Yeah, this week was
Nice out.
It's nice. It rained again here in Chiang Mai. We like rain, right, John?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
It makes it better mood.
Exactly.
I wouldn't mind a bit of rain here. It's really hot and torrid here in Venezuela.
Like a dry season? Is it a dry season there and a rainy season?
Yes, we're pretty much into the thick of the dry season here. It's just dry season and wet season.
Yeah, same is true here. This is just the first rain of the rainy season. It'll be dry by next season.
There's Jim. Hi, Jim.
Jim, we don't hear you. At least I don't.
Jim? James? Is it Jim or James?
Sorry, guys. I was trying to figure out how to do like a double call just because my PC audio is not very good, which is something that we dealt with last time. So I was trying to join on my phone because I'm going to be screen sharing as well. So that said, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yep.
Okay, all the better. Yeah. So you guys were talking about rainy season. We are getting that. We had the first rain, 2 days ago?
Yeah, we're getting lucky. It rained today and a couple of days ago. So yeah, for those that don't know, that might not be following, in North Thailand, there's dry season where it gets polluted because the farmers burn the crops during the dry season, so it gets pretty nasty in the air. So rain is good. It clears out the air, stops the burning.
Oh, so there's still a lot of slash and burn farming in Thailand?
Yeah, I think it's also
that's all that is.
neighboring countries too, like Burma and others.
It also rained off of Burma and Laos this week as well. The storm just went through all the countries, soaked everyone with rain, so we should be good for a couple days.
Okay, I think, James, if you're ready, we're here.
Yes, no, I am. I'm just out and about as usual, and so I'm just closing the door. Yeah, I'll share my screen. And John, I did just have a chance to check your homework. That's awesome. Very, very different from what I did. So I think today is going to be kind of fun because it's going to kind of be like show and tell. Yeah, I definitely want to see what people have been working on or the conclusions that you came to. Before we actually start, so John, I know you put something together. Did anyone else on this call put something together?
I did not. I forgot we had that on.
No, it's okay. You're not naughty if there's no homework done. It's if you had something and you had thoughts, it's just an opportunity to share it. So come to a conclusion. I
think I sent some to you, James, privately. I feel, or we are calls maybe, but I don't think I wrote it down. Or maybe I think I sent it to you privately about some of the marketing stuff and the Colts launch. If that's what it was.
Where's yours, John?
Excuse me?
Where's your homework? Or you only sent it to the teacher, or did you send it to the whole class?
So I'll share my screen, and then John had just DM'd it to me as a sort of screenshot. So, John, I'm sorry I didn't check your homework ahead of time, but it looks really good. Again, very different approach. I appreciate, frankly, the geometry. Yeah, so I'm trying to pull that up. Can you guys see what John had put together?
Yeah, it is nice.
Yep. So, John, can you lead us through this?
Yeah, it'll be easier maybe if I share my screen and the
Very true.
just for a minute.
Absolutely.
Would you mind sharing this maybe in the Tokenomics chat group or so we could zoom in?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, let me do that. Okay.
James, I posted something on the Tokenomics chat group immediately after last week's meeting. I don't know if you saw it.
Which I did something that you were saying specifically regarding the vendor escrow. Is that correct?
Let me paycheck. It was, it's a few messages up from the last message on the token design team chat. It mostly focused on questions about whether how should vendors stake, and if buyers should stake tokens as well.
Yeah,
Just
so
sort of
I think maybe something that's worthwhile before we jump into what John Seidner is. We've had some like a messy terminology here because we essentially have two kinds of staking, as I understand it. We have staking, like the stake to make. Vendors and marketplaces just some amount of money or tokens that they need to stake in order to even play the game. And then we also have staking on the transactional level, which is a sort of like mutual escrow system potentially between the buyer and the seller for individual transactions. Mind you, that's my understanding of it, but I think part of this discussion we should try to like clarify the terms. Which one is staking and which one is like some other word.
Well, yeah. I mean that's pretty clear, James. But I was referring to staking, not the kind that buyers use when normal, ordinary transactions, but rather staking for some special cases. Like if you're buying a really expensive piece of equipment, and there could be a remote case. It doesn't happen quite often, but it could happen, where the carrier deems the package as lost. Yeah. And then like a month later it just magically changes to delivered, and the buyers and the sellers hit with the cost, but the buyer has kept the item basically for free because the escrow was canceled and everything.
Yeah, so they got double paid. Yeah, so I think there was, mind you, a lot of merit in your document. I did read through it. I think it's not even an edge case. I think it opens a can of worms that we should open. Maybe not today, but that pertains to one of those edge case scenarios, and then also the vendor-buyer relationship, right? Because that's what we're discussing. And I believe in what you had put in the document. You were mentioning that in those cases, in those examples, the buyer themselves could potentially put forward some sort of escrow of their own in order to receive a discount, just to sort of mitigate or smooth over some of those instances. That said, I think we should probably circle back to that later on in the call, just because we're looking more at the macro level right now, and that is like one of many very valid, not even micro, that's still kind of macro, but like, yeah, let's figure out the big canvas and then discuss that. I think there's a lot of validity in, but let's look at what John had put together first. I think that would be prudent for the team.
Is my screen visible?
Yep.
You guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, my motivation was not to propose a design, but just to have something written, have something drawn, so that we can see the shapes of things and move them around and discuss them and stuff more easily. So just more like as a starting point. So I'm not proposing this as a design, it's just like a possible viable design, maybe. But it starts with the marketplace. So the marketplace, in order to use the protocol, has to stake into a vault. And the marketplace can charge fees to its participants, buyers and sellers, however it sees fit. Maybe it has different marketplaces, may have different ways of doing that. But in order to use the protocol, it stakes into a vault. It has to keep a minimum amount of Loadpipe token in this vault. Where it gets the Loadpipe token is, we'll get to that, I guess, shortly. But so the marketplace is required to keep a minimum amount in this vault. If it goes below the minimum, then I guess the marketplace could be like penalized or something like that. And I suppose that at some point they would just not be allowed to use the protocol anymore if it went below some other minimum quality. If it got to zero or something. So the vault will degrade with use as they use the protocol, like as sort of a protocol fee. The token will be taken out of the vault and will flow back into the treasury. So the marketplace is incentivized to keep the vault stocked But maybe also just to, so as not to penalize higher volume, maybe the rate could decrease. I mean, there could be a lot of little adjustments like that, but maybe like the rate could decrease too for marketplaces with higher volume, something like that. So that's an outflow into the treasury. So we have marketplaces staking token, and then that slowly flows back into the treasury. The treasury pays out to service providers. So service providers could be churches, reviewers, or maybe even relay operators, if we want to include the relay system in on that. But whoever provides service, like does work for the protocol, they are rewarded with tokens. So that's an outflow from the treasury. So the demand is the marketplace needing token to use the protocol, and the supply is rewards to helpers in the protocol. And then going back to the marketplace needs to get the token from somewhere. So they can either buy it in the market, peer-to-peer transaction from service providers or anyone who has it, could be even other marketplaces. Or they could buy it from the treasury, which is the buyer and seller of last resort. And that's pretty much like the gist of it. So supply is created by rewarding, and demand is created by marketplaces needing to stake. And this is going to be a balance of supply and demand that's going to set the price of the token. And that could be adjusted by tweaking different variables. Like the treasury could adjust the amount of reward it gives for certain actions, or it could adjust the rates that it charges for use. When it decides to give out rewards, it could mint new, so inflating the supply, or it could just pay out from like its own stash, so not inflating the supply. So little things that the treasury can do manually to kind of affect things if things are going too far one way or the other. And then in the future, maybe that could just be automated smoothly, so that there's no invisible hands needs to be.
Case, just when you thought I'd seen it all.
Sorry.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Oh no,
I was going to say.
there's noise on my side. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it was error on my side. Please go ahead, James.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when you say automatically, I think initially, and maybe forever, but initially we're probably going to want some sort of treasury DAO component to sort of do this as a manual process. And then, especially from like the sort of like risk regulation point of view, we'll probably want to do something that's sort of algorithmic, and I think we're going to be better informed as to how we do that when we have the data, when this thing's actually live. And the reason you do that is because if you're doing monetary policy in the wrong way, it could be perceived as something akin to market manipulation, even though it's purely in earnest. We're not trying to do bad stuff here. So, but yeah, I think we're going to want some sort of like sub-DAO within the Loadpipe protocol, specifically focused on that ratio of distribution to burn or things like that, or emission rates and whatnot. And if we kind of want to cover our ass in that regard, I suppose we might even include some of the vendors from the initial marketplaces as part of that committee, with the understanding that it's probably a temporary thing and not a forever solution.
Yeah, I think a good system would be one where we have control at the beginning, like manual control at the beginning until things get off the ground. Yeah, I understand what you're saying about like legal kind of issues. Yeah, I don't know about stuff like that, but that makes sense. But more manual control at the beginning, just to kind of tweak parameters and then slowly let go and make it more decentralized as it kind of comes to maturity and we see where the issues are and stuff. And I think like the next step would be like whatever system we decide. Like next steps would be gaming and simulation, like trying to figure out how the system could be manipulated and ways that could be stopped.
Yeah, John, you and I didn't actually meet, but first time I had met with the team officially discussing this. Something I talked about quite a bit is from any sort of design point of view, you can understand like 90% of the problems versus doing the total polarities. So like scenarios where you have all the money in the world is zero, all the transactions happening at once, zero transactions, totally good governance, totally bad governance. And so So yeah, I think that when we have something solid, which I think is going to be soon as a team, then we'll try to break it. Yeah, no, I really like your design here. Maybe it sounds like a little bit silly to the team, but the circular design, I think, makes more sense in that it sort of creates this imagery of like a nucleus, decentralized centralization. And I think like Loadpipe, for example, like, yeah, we have the sort of treasury and they're all really good with that, but then we have like maybe an outer ring, which is Loadpipe itself, the Loadpipe DAO. And I think something that we haven't discussed as much is the sort of introduction through the cellular boundary for like viewing this. The treasury is the nucleus, Loadpipe DAO is the sort of wall, and that sort of process. Like we've thrown around, we expect people to be staking if they're vendors or marketplace like providers, but we also haven't actually discussed those numbers yet. So not just yet. I think that's something we'd like to talk about as well. That said, John, I would like to show what I have for some conversation, but I was going to say, is there anything else that you would like to point out?
No, there's some notes in the margins there. I just did it earlier today, so I haven't even really fully thought it through. But the design makes it look centralized, but I think that it's not as centralized as it looks. Like the vault is in the center, but maybe the responsibilities of the vault could be like a different model, right? Maybe the responsibilities of the vault could be like offloaded to like relays or service providers or something like that. There's probably a lot of different permutations of that design. And other designs that we can look at.
It's not actually centralized, it's well organized. I think, yeah, we have a vault which is doing some sort of tokenomic policy, and the fact is there's no escaping that Loadpipe is a protocol, right? And it's doing protocol actions, and so consequently Loadpipe, where some components of the protocol are in the center of everything the marketplace participants are actually engaging with. That said, I think as far as like the marketing team might be concerned, we really have two groups, right? We have the traditional vendors who are already accustomed, I dare say, numb to the pain from engaging with traditional Web2 marketplaces. So they're not going to be too worried about centralization. Rather, the people who will be the sort of like crypto enthusiasts, like our buyers. And I think they'll understand there are ways to communicate the same product.
And centralization comes with some benefits as well. So some balance of centralization and decentralization is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not like all or the other. It's not like because decentralization is good or decentralization is better. The right balance is probably what we want.
I entirely agree, but I'd like to go back to something Bill said again on that first night. Like we were talking about the negative actions members or marketplace creators or vendors could do, like selling weapons, for example, right? And I don't think as a protocol, as a technology provider, we should concern ourselves with that. We should create the tooling so that if we have to step in because the government or a government knocks on our door, then we can, but otherwise that should entirely be in the marketplace's hands. So I'm going to share my screen. I don't have as much of the governance.
I mean, I have one. I love this, but I have comment. If I could share now or later, just.
Yeah, I have a question on John's model as well. Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, I like it. I guess I just wonder, is the seller staking now or anywhere, or it's just the marketplace now in this model?
In this model, the seller is not staking now. The seller is just paying fees to the marketplace.
Okay.
Again, I'm not advocating this design. This is just an example design.
And I have a question on, because it seems like the central difference here is like the degradation of the state for the marketplaces. So in that world, we would write like a staking contract that like slowly drains the underlying staked funds, and then with the marketplaces just have to like continually rebuy and replenish their like contract, I guess, or Would it be like
Yeah, and my thinking on this, the amount of stake would degrade with use, with use of the protocol, and they would have to keep replenishing it, so they would be incentivized to keep getting the token somehow, and then getting it into the staking vault.
But wouldn't replenishing occur automatically? I mean, if sellers stake a certain amount of token, once the transaction is completed, they get it back, right?
In this model they don't get it back. So that could be like another variation, but like a marketplace needs to get tokens somehow, right? So another way they could do this is by being a service provider themselves. Like if they provide services as well as be the marketplace, then they're like handling the supply side and the demand side both themselves, and maybe they can have a net zero cost in that way, cost of doing business.
Wild thought that staking contract could be also doubling as a paymaster, right? So, and we're using our ERC20 as the sort of like settlement token for that paymaster. I mean, again, that's going to require some thought, but that's one possible implementation. And then that is also okay, so they're bundling transactions and paying for user transactions. They're paying for them in underlying token, which would require them to keep their stake well supplied, right?
Exactly. I mean, I was always under the impression that staking load tokens was a kind of an insurance to ensure that the transaction goes well. So it would make sense that once the transaction is completed, to me, the seller should get their tokens back.
Okay. Yeah, maybe staking is being misused as a term here then, because I don't foresee that. I mean, I didn't think of that. Was not what I was thinking about when I was.
So this is what I was trying to bring up earlier in the call. It is, and maybe it's me as well, but it seems I'm not just the only one. There are essentially two kinds of staking that we've discussed as a team. The first is staking in order to participate, period. So marketplaces have to stake some amount of funds permanently as long as they want the marketplace to exist, and vendors have to do the same in order to be a vendor on said marketplace. So that's staking number one. Then you have staking for the individual transactions, the sort of cool stuff that you had shared earlier in the Tokenomics chat. Is that correct? Because I've heard them both, and I don't want to conflate the two terms.
Guys, I've never thought that staking had to be per transaction. I thought it was sort of an insurance, but not per transaction. It's actually for as long as the seller is selling on the marketplace, it has to stake some tokens as a sign of good faith towards the buyers.
Yeah.
So as far as I
understand it, there was just one staking.
As far as I understand it, I think where the confusion is coming in is that James referred to escrow staking earlier, right? And so, escrow on a per transaction basis is not, I would not use the phrase staking. And I think in our earlier staking always created a role, and John's that diagram did not have seller vendor staking, but only was sort of an explanation of marketplace staking, right? Because again, those are sort of the two roles, and we also identified judges as someone who might need to stake in order to get into their role. But marketplaces, that is an explanation of how we might implement marketplaces staking, where they're paying the fee through their stake, and then there's no vendor staking in that diagram. And again, that's how I'm understanding the not only the diagram but also the miscommunication.
James, I'm also pretty clear that there's staking that the buyers do when they want to purchase something. That's marketplace staking, sort of call it that way. But when
we call that escrow.
Yeah, escrow. Let's call that escrow. Okay, but when Andres was raising the point about that he was under the impression that that sellers stake a certain amount of token once as an insurance, I still think that a seller should stake. That would occur automatically, of course. Sellers should stake a certain amount of load token based per transaction. Why? Because that's how much the seller has to respond with at any given time if transactions go south.
Yeah. So again, I just think it's like just good for the team. This is already very productive. So we have the actual staking in order to participate, and then we have escrow for even some of the edge cases you outlined. That can be like a pretty normalized thing, and depending on how fast these transactions happen, it's not any sort of friction point for the buyer because they've essentially bought it, and what you're just doing is giving a delayed refund in certain cases. So yeah, we have staking, and then we have escrow. And the transactional component, like I'm not going to talk about today. I think if we really want to get this done, we need to iron out the high level because there are so many niches that we can drill down to in each one of like these different components. So yes, okay, we have escrow for transactions, and we'll get to that later and discuss how to execute that the best. But before then, can you guys see my screen?
I don't see it.
Yes.
Oh, I see it now.
Let me try again.
I do.
Okay. Yeah, so this is very simple. I think our actual solution is going to be very, very simple, and we want it to be simple, especially for vendors and marketplace participants. So essentially, right here, we have everyone that exists before Loadpipe. At the beginning of the world, there was nothing, and then there was light. So in order for anyone who wants to be a market maker or a vendor, or a market maker or a vendor in another marketplace, they need to go through a process of currently calling it stake to make, in my mind, or stake to earn.
What is a market maker?
Market maker is someone who pays in order to instantiate a marketplace, which is something we talked about several times. And if that's not just right.
No. I would just call it marketplace. Like market maker is I don't know. It's like market maker. I think of like LP, right?
Yeah. No, I know, but they are literally a market maker. I totally get you though.
True.
All right, so marketplace maker. Yeah. Anyways, these are just individuals. They have to go through the stake to make process. When they stake some amount of currency, then they either have a marketplace or they have a page on whatever the vendor store is or however we're promoting that information. I'm sticking with two here. It's not necessary. It's just we know there's more than one marketplace. We're going to start with Hamza. We might have something else. So at this point, they haven't done anything. They haven't made any sales. They haven't done any sort of governance. However, as soon as they do sales, and I think this is something we'll discuss later on, maybe not this specific call, I think we should collect fees on a marketplace level. I think that's simpler for us, and it also provides them a little bit more autonomy and flexibility on how they do that. I think maybe it's bi-weekly, or maybe it's monthly, or maybe if the gas fees are cheap enough, depending on technological implementation, we can do it instantaneously. I know there are things for that. Regardless, we're collecting money from the marketplace. That is our transaction fee, and that is the vast amount of how we're earning the currency that we're going to use. Mind you, this is not the currency we're going to use to pay the team or how we get rich. This is rather like operational fees and fees to fund any sort of tokenomic monetary policy that we have. So that goes into a vault, and we'll revisit this later. And then these marketplaces, they can do governance. I say governance determines policy, penalties, proceeds, and purpose. I was trying to have all the P's, but essentially they get to self-govern up until the point where we literally have a problem with governments, and we have to like step in. Or like a vast majority of the people on the Loadpipe protocol are using it are upset. So primarily it's them. They can determine how rewards are distributed later, what their penal process looks like internally, what sort of roles they assign, what sort of monetary benefits they provide people who are operating as like governors in the various different categories we discussed. It's all them. We give them the tools. And after we determine the tokenomics, I think we're going to spend quite a bit here in order to give them the best out-of-the-box toolbox for them to use. So from there, Where we get interested again as a protocol is the reputation. We're checking their homework. We're seeing how they're doing. We're measuring those sort of metrics. And based off of the reputation, and we discussed the reputation score before, which is the prototype, right, is sort of all these variables. I'm sure it's going to change over time, and it'll certainly change after we launch. But the idea is we measure how good they are as a marketplace based off of various different metrics that both the user as well as other vendors in the marketplace care about. From that, we give emissions. And so this is our inflationary action. This is decreasing the price of the token temporarily. This is just rewarding people with more of the token. We're currently discussing a non-finite supply of tokens, and we can play with that later if you guys want. So, inflationary, we give rewards, we print more tokens. That rewards good actors, and they can distribute them based off of what the marketplace is. Deflationary, back to this Loadpipe earnings vault. This marketplace revenue, maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 0.5%. It'll be determined by some members of the team initially, and then when we understand things better, probably automated. But what we can do with this money is a buyback and burn. So, especially initially, right, where we're not chasing as much revenue, we're trying to stabilize things and grow to a sort of point where we can exist, and consequently, we want to support token price, and so we can literally throw everything beyond what our expenses are at a buyback and burn, and we don't have to turn that off. I think Uniswap, well, not Uniswap, but various different protocols sort of have this switch built into the smart contract, which will turn on or off this behavior, and sometimes they automate it, sometimes it's in the hands of the team, but it is a very powerful tool, and it's also powerful for like belief in the system itself, which is important. Otherwise, people get skittish. So, token utility is very simple. It's used for voting power, for governance, and obviously marketplaces and vendors are going to care about governance because this is how they get paid. This is how they determine their individual tax transactions. It's also how they determine rewards for governance or anything pertaining to money flowing into and out of the ecosystems. They care for that regard. Something else I think, again, we can do is like a discount some way. Even for like a vendor, a discount might be something like, well, the opposite of a discount. They give a discount on the transaction fee that we collect, for example. The idea being is we're giving them money, but only money they can spend within the Loadpipe ecosystem, right? And yeah, those are my thoughts. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's really good. It's definitely. I think I saw some thumbs up in the group too. I mean, you don't say any utility that's stake to make isn't in the token utility. It is, right?
Well, there's a huge amount of utility. So whether or not we require Loadpipe token to be a barrier of entry into the ecosystem is up to us, and I think that's actually less important because I think the utility is certainly there. If we have actual marketplaces and we have actual users, and we actually give vendors and marketplace makers the tools they need to self-govern, they already have the incentives, like especially because it's this sort of mutual cooperation, mutual self-destruction sort of relationship, right? The vendors do want different things than the market makers and vice versa, but they kind of have to work together in order to succeed. Yeah, they're going to want the token or that ever-changing relationship, in my mind.
I agree. I do like this. I think Andre said it earlier in a call, in another conversation, but I think what if something bad happens 3 months later? That's not really just on the per transaction, but it could be like a bad actor or a bad product later. I mean, where would those funds come from? Or there's no.
Yeah, my goal here isn't the what if something goes bad, because as soon as we as a team agree on something like this, then we can try to break it, and it'll get probably twice the size it is right now.
Yeah.
And then we still have to drill down into the individual components to determine them, right? Like I'm using a lot of abbreviation, like marketplace reputation. You guys would know what that looks like, and that these are all different variables that we'll also have to determine. Same for emissions, same for this Loadpipe Central Reserve Governance DAO. So the monetary policy DAO for Loadpipe, that's going to require some thought. But philosophically, as a team, do we agree with something like this? Because if we have something like this, that's simple enough, then we can start breaking it.
How are transaction fees taken in this model?
I'm thinking, it depends on how you guys want to build it. We could do all sorts of things, right? So we could just have a bill to the marketplace maker, for example, and they literally pay it and they have to handle that. We could automate it so people are spending cryptocurrency in order to buy things. Well, we can certainly, as a protocol, redirect some of those funds into some sort of escrow vehicle or vault, like a mini vault. We could charge some fee to vendors. If gas fees are very high, we could just charge some sort of monthly fee, and that's based off of the previous month's transaction volume and sales that they had. There's a lot of different ways we can do it.
Who is paying the transaction fees? The marketplaces or the vendors?
To be determined. I think it makes sense for the vendors to pay, but it to be a marketplace level decision between the vendors and the marketplace. I think just who's willing to foot the bill, right? The marketplace maker, they'll probably, in the stake to make, they're probably going to be willing to foot quite a bit more money because it's an investment for them in a way that it's not for vendors. And then vendors,
what is
they're already in sorry, what?
You can finish what you're saying. I was going to my next question.
Vendors are
ask a question.
Sure.
I think Paul asked this before, but I already forgot. What was the marketplace maker? And what's stake to make?
Okay, yeah, so as we have discussed before, and maybe this wasn't decided, but the idea is Loadpipe is a protocol which enables individuals to create marketplaces, right? Not just individuals, organizations as well, but anyone can make their own marketplace using the protocol. So the marketplace maker is the person that puts things together. They're like the largest business owner. Garo, if you like guns and guns are legal, you might create a gun marketplace because one doesn't exist, for example. You might do that for alcohol, you might do that for food, you might do that for shoes, you might do that for music or NFTs even, potentially. Yeah.
The question of who pays the fees, I believe we discussed that on the last Tokenomics meeting. We were talking about marketplace charging fees for each transaction as a percentage in some other currency, USDT, BTC, etc. And then a portion of this marketplace fee being used by the marketplace to pay the protocol. Loadpipe could then use this money to buy back tokens.
Yes, exactly. That's the buyback and burn here, and what I appreciated that you pointed out the most is the fact that we do not need to require people to spend Loadpipe or even pay the transaction fee in Loadpipe. If they paid the transaction fee in some sort of other currency like USDT, and we're doing this buyback and burn, we're actually supporting the token price because we're changing, assuming we're using a decentralized exchange, we're changing the ratio between Loadpipe and whatever the liquidity per token is. And then we're burning it also after that, so it's like a double bump. Sorry, Carl, back to your question though. Stake to make is this idea that in order to own a marketplace or own a shop within a marketplace, you need to, in good faith, put some money in order to essentially rent a stall, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, thank you.
What is the market maker making the market in?
What do you mean?
It's
The
marketplace.
market maker buys and sells.
It's marketplace, right? It's marketplace.
Yeah, marketplace. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I think
my
we.
phone.
But it's true. I mean, I did take a note. I wrote it down. I mean, it is essentially a market maker, but it's a marketplace in e-commerce. But I guess you could look at
that's my question though. Conceptually, as a market maker, what are they making the market in? Like, what is their medium for market making?
JavaScript.
Yeah,
They're the person who hosts the marketplace, right? Like they're the person who builds the front end, right? That's a marketplace thing.
this is also like an alternative revenue stream for Loadpipe because there are a lot of things that people are going to need. So you have tons of earning potential outside of like any sort of fee or even the token stuff. Like just helping people set up these businesses could be a business of its own.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's a little bit more like high touch, like consultancy style. It made me think about it too, but I don't know if it's probably better to be a third party than official. Could be like a private company that we have that could offer that.
I think initially after Hamza, we're gonna want to do that anyways, even if it's not a permanent thing. Just to kick things off, it's a sort of free development help you see from like plenty of those protocols, even if it's just consulting for free.
I'd agree with the free. Yeah, I mean, it's true. We want to work with the users, which are the marketplaces. Yeah.
So just to stay on topic, though, that's what I've been thinking. And so back to the currency control, we have two actions that we can do for our monetary policy. We can determine the ratio of rewards that we give. And even this chart is a little inaccurate. We're going to put it in some sort of like bigger ball, and they can determine whether or not they give that directly to people in governance or if they split it on. That's up to them. But that's our positive switch, adding more tokens, reducing token price, but increasing enthusiasm. And then we have our deflationary action, which is using the fees that we collect from marketplaces. And we can discuss that more. But the fees we collect from marketplaces for buyback and burn. And that's still enthusiastic. It's still a good thing. There are two very, very powerful switches on either end. Do you guys...
So the source of demand here, I just want to make sure I understand how this works. The source of demand comes from judges need to stake to be a judge, right? Where's demand coming from?
So we have two vectors of demand based off of generally two kinds of people that you're going to see. You're going to see the vast majority of marketplace makers and vendors will care about governance because governance is not just how they determine their actions, which influence marketplace reputation and thus the tokens they earn, but governance also determines the marketplace behavior. For example, we discussed in the last Tokenomics call that you, as a marketplace, can decide to add an additional fee for additional revenue on some sort of transaction. Maybe 1%, maybe 5%. If you're the best marketplace ever, whatever people can tolerate, they can decide. And that's determined by governance. So if tokens equate to votes in that scenario, they're gonna want to be able to vote for that.
So one needs to stake the token in order to participate in governance. Is that right?
Would be more equipped for the governance because this tiny box could actually be its own chart, I think.
Is that the main source of demand or the only source of demand?
I think that's the most important source of demand, but you can't ignore the fact that some people just don't care. Some people don't care about voting, even if it's in their best interest. And so we should have some sort of program, in my opinion, or like discounts or some sort of smaller level, localized, individual monetary benefit for people, even if they have to pay less fees for a month. And if we have like down the line some sort of buyer redemption, it could be a literal discount for marketplaces. It could be something similar. It's just earn extra money.
And supply comes from minting new token from the vault. And where does that supply go first? When the vault mints new token, where does it end up?
So that's a secondary conversation because we're talking about emission schedule. It is a conversation we need to have.
Okay.
This is how I see it working when it's running. To your question, though, to your point, I think I'd have to see what is currently like tolerable because it's changed quite a bit. But we're probably, if we're doing some sort of IDO, we're probably doing anywhere from 10 to 20% of the total supply, the initial supply of low token, keeping 80% in escrow, and rather than printing new tokens, probably providing tokens from the escrow itself for these sort of rewards and airdrops, and it's not just going to be in this model. We're going to have to do it for like marketing purposes. So very different from like when it's running.
Well, why not infinite supply?
So I think it should be infinite supply, but I think just from like a roll-up perspective, operating with a finite supply might be ideal initially for a couple of reasons.
What do you mean initially?
Yeah, initially, like the first like year or two of launch, like we can say that we can infinitely print, but there's a very large difference in terms of the psychology. And I know you don't like this as much, but like the public's perception of token price, if you have something that they're printing more, it's a really easy piece of propaganda for the butters in the same way that buyback and burn is such a positive tool in that way. And so there is this like psychological component that is unfortunately necessary, I think, during the nascent early stages of the business. Even though we don't care about it, we still kind of have to make it.
Yeah, I agree. I am philosophically opposed to thinking about this through the lens of like price psychology rather than just like straight utility.
Yeah, no, the utility's there. The price will be from the utility, but early on, we need everything, I think. It's a big challenge. I think we can do it. And early price vulnerability, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that kills a project, even if you understand in for a fact that utility is going to be driving the price in the long term. If the price spikes down because of, frankly, some bullshit, that's no problem. We're going to solve here this way. Or even as a team, it doesn't matter what we do, so we kind of have to handle that. It's like the marketing team, I suppose.
Yeah, but I think that like that eventuality only exists in a world where we have like a large initial mint, right? Like if we mint a lot to begin with and distribute it in like an unvested way to market participants, and we just have this like sort of like large token slush fund, then we're liable to like fuck up and drive the price to zero, right? But like again, I think it's more of a question of like initial tuning of the supply dynamic and allowing mint to operate on like, cause like I guess what you're suggesting is like that we do a large initial mint, we distribute to like in whatever like airdrop or team fashion, and then we have like a treasury which is then distributing like a large percentage of what our initial mint is, and then we have like this understanding of eventually we will transition to a place where we're minting the token, but and it like has infinite supply then eventually down the road, but initially we're just going to be distributing out of a vault, and we have zero sort of like supply growth, and it's all just like sort of dictated, like then the supply dynamics are dictated by a DAO, right? So we give ourselves the power to like distribute the tokens and ultimately kill the token rather than just like designing a system that's down from the get-go.
So there's quite a bit to unpack there, but one, even in what I'm suggesting, it doesn't have to be a large amount of supply. It doesn't have to be a huge 1 billion sort of token initial mint and then we're doing this. It could be a very small amount. The point being is during like the first like 3 months, during like an IDO, we want people enthusiastic about the token. If anything, just for marketing, and not even like pumping the token price or any of the Ponzi-nomics that you hear about, but rather just people are talking about it. And by having temporary finite supply, we'll put it in the white paper, we're not being disingenuous, like we'll introduce more, and we have inflationary and deflationary actions that the DAO will do initially from the governance DAO and then eventually automatically. We're not messing with the supply, so it can have that sort of initial growth period, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm less concerned about this specifically, like it's ultimately what the team decides, like as far as like launch strategy, because there's more than just that. There's also like whether or not we're doing an IDO, an ICO, getting investment funds, how this is rolling out, because we could theoretically start from zero with zero supply, and that works too, and that's a very different strategy.
The difference here is it's like a framing question maybe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think that like it seems like you're approaching this from the idea that we're like selling a token rather than selling a product, right? Like that's sort of what I'm saying maybe is that like I think we're selling the idea of a decentralized marketplace, and the token serves a necessary function in replacing some of the business functionality of a centralized marketplace. Right, so the token is a mechanism for us to be able to reward the sort of business functions that we have to build out as part of the decentralized system. And this is like, and again, why I said like I'm philosophically opposed to like this idea of like thinking about the token in terms of price dynamics is that like that's what it seems like the focus is on those parts, right? Rather than saying like, well, how does the token flow from the mid phase into like the judges' wallets? We're like, okay, well, what is best for advertising and marketing to token speculators?
Yeah, so you're not entirely off the mark. I've already told you I do approach this from like a different point of view. However, I would like to say that specifically what I have here on the chart is exactly what you're talking about. I think this is focused on the sustainable business model, regardless of token price. And however we have to deal with any sort of macro social economics of token price, that can be governance DAO initially before we automate it when we get our links. The only reason I brought this up is because the question was asked about the initial token supply and why we might do that. And that is very different. Like an IDO is very different from the actual business itself in my mind. And it really depends on like what the strategy is. I was talking to Mike earlier today about like the rollout strategy. I think there's quite a bit that we're going to have to do like for the marketing component. And it's just temporary because like what you're saying, the vision is, I think the way we're going to go. Oh, absolutely. Like we have all the components for a self-sustainable marketplace that actually liberates people who want to create marketplaces and actually decentralizes things and actually makes the world a better place. But if we're doing something like an IDO, then we're going to have those conversations. And that's a team discussion. Like, we don't even know if we want to do an IDO. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we're still deciding.
So, yeah, Bo, I actually agree with you as far as the actual economics of the job internally.
Well, whatever the decision is on that, it still stands that regardless of whether you do airdrops or any initial circulation Kickstarter thing, if I'm not mistaken, the amount of token in circulation is dependent on market volume, right? I mean, more sellers staking tokens means more tokens in circulation.
It depends on the rollout strategy. I think if we're going a strictly vendor approach, we're not worried so much about token price initially because they aren't either. It's going to be a sort of experiment, and they're not even going to understand the emission rewards. Like this whole thing won't actually be valuable to vendors until it gets like some adoption, because they're just not going to understand it, I think. And so yeah, like with rollout strategy, we could do a zero initial supply and then mince and go from there. And that's entirely valid. We probably still want to do airdrops, though, for various different reasons. But yeah, we could do that entirely. No IDO, entirely bootstrapped, organic growth, and rather how we're getting the growth is indoctrinating and onboarding like vendors and buyers, which is something we want to do anyways, right?
Okay.
It depends. Like, do you think we're going to need a big marketing war chest? Like, or do you think as a team with our connections to people, we know that we're going to be able to get the right people involved with the less marketing?
I mean, I think
do we need money?
The more I look and think about this, we're really B2B. We're not, if we're a protocol of marketplaces, so we're kind of hoping Hamzas and other Hamzas are doing the marketing, and we're incentivizing them with token to do the marketing, and we're supporting them to grow, and we grow. So we're trying to kind of be a platform marketplace to grow and incentivize them to grow with us. It's kind of like B2B
I'm down
in a way.
So seeing the forest for the trees, though, forgetting all the initial supply questions, because, again, we can drill into a lot of this. Do we as a team agree with what I have here as far as the focus? Or, like, how would you like to change it?
You post it on the chat, on the Discord chat, so we can refer to it later and give it more detailed feedback.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think a lot of people were giving, like I said, I think a lot of us are liking it, but yeah, I think we need a little time to process it, but we're liking it.
Yeah, I'll drop some notes in the chat as well, because it's going to be hard to remember some of this. I'm sorry, I have a potato for a computer, so I'll do that later. Yeah, so our goal is to get some things done within a time frame. This is not big, but it's flexible enough that we can change a lot of the components. For example, like John was saying earlier, not just John, several members of the team, automate things, right? So we can change this out. We can have more nuance to our inflationary action, deflationary action. We're going to have to drill down marketplace reputation. We're going to have to go through the exact same process we are doing today with like governance. Same for escrow. Thank you both for escrow as a term. So yeah, let's get on the same page, get something down, put it in the white paper, and then drill down from there categorically.
Okay, great. And we said we're trying to aim for early April to have this nailed down, so we have a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, right?
That's why I'm pushing. Yeah.
James, I have a question, please.
Sure.
I guess it's too early because you say that this is going to be larger in the future, but is there any way we can estimate at least the amount of resources that we need to hold this in place along the time, right? Like, do we need someone to be checking the system? We need someone to do the legal part of buybacks or the token emissions. I mean, how much resources will this system absorb? Or everything in general?
So I can't estimate the developer cost. That would be on the dev team. The same way that we're talking about collective marketplace transaction fees. I think the dev team is going to have the best answer to that question. If we're trying to have like a cost estimate for all of this, so this is actually free because this is us. We're the ones doing this as far as the legal component. As far as like the earnings vaults, I know there are software as a service that are like maybe $500 a month for like larger organizations. There's some sort of vault structure, and it's just a wallet address. So we just configured our smart contracts to send it there. Our automation is additional development time. That's probably going to be expensive, so we're probably doing this manually initially anyways to save money. All in all, I think this is going to be pretty cheap, actually, besides the dev costs, because most of this, and eventually almost all of this, will be baked into the code in the smart contracts.
Okay, so it will be development cost and
yeah, I think so.
Little part in maintenance, let's say.
Yeah, I think so. I think if we decide to go this route, like John, Garo, they'll sit with it for a little bit and they can probably tell you. One thing we also need to consider quite a bit is gas fees. And I think we were talking about using optimism rate as a team, but gas fees are important because if you have low gas fees, you can solve problems like this in a very different way, as opposed to having high gas fees, right, where you have a different solution. So.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, guys. I actually have to go. This is already 8 minutes. This is it.
Sure. Okay. But no, this is great. Thanks, James. And next week, same time. And of course, let's not wait till the next call. Please speak to James or others between then to keep pushing us ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so before everyone leaves, I'm going to take a screenshot. I'm going to drop it in the chat. I'll drop some notes later today. Let's agree or disagree, figure that out, just so we can get something done. And then after we all agree, we can start reading it up and throw out the hypothetical, like what if doomsday scenarios happen, and move on from there.
Okay.
But thank you guys.
Thanks too. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.